everyone. This week on Great Chat, we talk about which uniquely human traits and skills we should all be doubling down on in the age of AI. Is Marc Andreessen right that VCs are the safest of them all? I am Ashley, and this week we are joined by Helen, Mac, and Sally.
I only have one thing I want to talk about today, and it is the fact that the Pope is American. We have an American Pope. Like, what do you think the first thing you get one of us, like rowdy, ridiculous people, you put a Chicago Bulls fan in the Vatican, what happens? Like, I am obsessed with this. I think it's amazing. I think it's hilarious. The memes are out of control. Have you guys been like as deep in it?
The memes are so good. I thought I would get sick of it after 24 hours, and it was like we're on hour 39, and I was still just, I was seeing repeat memes, and I was laughing again.
Well, forget about the memes. I also love the like brothers being interviewed on the lawn with their like polo shirts, talking about how they're not a Cubs fan and they're a Sox fan.
Definitely a Sox fan. They found footage of him at the 2005 World Series wearing Sox gear. I mean, I actually thought like AI was probably what helped find him, because how do you look through that footage and find find like a specific person, right, in the stand?
This came out last week, but I feel like it's a miss to not talk about it. Fidji taking on the role of CEO of apps.
Yeah.
I know, Helen, you knew Fidji a little bit.
Yeah, we worked
CEO of apps at OpenAI. Missed that part.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Apps are the
Funny
world.
is,
CEO of all apps.
I feel like she
Maybe
became
that was
CEO of Facebook app like the same time. You remember when like Meta became Meta, and then there was like all of the sort of business units underneath it, and she became CEO of Facebook app. I feel like there's some parallels here to OpenAI. But yes, Fidji is wonderful, and I feel really lucky to have worked with her like earlier in her career at Facebook.
I don't know her at all personally, but I was so happy to see only good things on the internet. Like, it seems she's actually pretty universally
Totally.
liked and respected, and was called high signal, which is like an extra compliment in these slop days. So yeah, I'm pumped. Good hire.
Yeah.
By the way, like also like leaving a post of a publicly traded company, DoorDash, and it seems like they didn't have a succession plan. And for her to go to not be the CEO of the entire company, but a subset of it is also, saying a lot.
Instacart.
Will someone tell me, can my like more AI literate friends tell me what CEO of apps means?
I don't think we know exactly what it means, but from the details that have emerged, it sounds like the COO and the CFO will report into Fidji. And it also sort of like solidifies a lot of speculation that OpenAI would fully get into the apps game, right? And that was the sort of like, do they stay a language, a model company forever, and then leave it to developers and, leave it to the venture-backed world to create all the app layer on top of it, or do they themselves get into apps? So I felt like this was sort of them making very clear they're going to get into apps, and that's probably the future. And so I think maybe the other question, that emerges from that is like, what does Sam still oversee, right? And so it sounds like research directly reports into him, right? And then maybe
I think
the
that was
technical
also
pieces,
Yeah, I think that was also my takeaway, was like initially the first application released ChatGPT, which is built on top of the OpenAI models, but there's been signals of ambitions that they want to build other apps, which I think will be also in conflict with a lot of these startups that are building on top of these models. You look at like a kind of a template, which is the Apple App Store model. If you open the application or the App Store, but you also are have all the information to be able to build and optimize for that, is there going to be some conflict? But yeah, I think that it definitely is a signal for OpenAI's bigger ambitions on the application layer.
The takeaway that I had was like, okay, so Fidji gets all the metrics, right? She's holding the bag. So she gets like the financial metrics, the growth metrics, like the adoption metrics, all of those things. And Sam gets
also, I think,
vibes.
Yeah, and
straight vibes,
quality. Yeah, things you can precisely measure.
And I think, Helen, I don't know if you mentioned also, but also I thought what's interesting was Kevin Weil, who's the chief product officer, also is reporting to Fidji, along with Brad, COO, and Sarah Fryer, the CFO.
Helen and I were at a dinner last week where there was a lot of like interesting debate and conversation around this. And And I think one thing we've talked about as a group is how interesting it is for ChatGPT to be investing in the app layer, given that they already have so much data and information from us on how we want to interact with it. I know I've walked you guys through my like longevity bro use cases, but what a cool position they're in to already have so much signal from their user base in terms of like what types of experiences and use cases their ton, I don't know what their user numbers are, but like insane number of users already want.
100%. Like, imagine if they took the top 3 use cases of how people are using ChatGPT, and I'm sure those directly relate to like uh, areas where they're getting the most data from users, right? Like, they could arguably build the best. They're well positioned to build the best apps, just based on that alone. So that is super interesting, and expectations are really high. Yeah, I think it'll just be very, very interesting how this all comes out. Didn't they just launch something with health yesterday or a couple days ago? I think I saw.
I think
Anything?
they're working closely with the FDA right
Okay.
now on various applications. So, and there's been a few signals on that. Also, speaking of, just analyzing data, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Fiji who really built the ad network on Instacart and using a lot of the data around traffic. And
I saw all the jokes about like, oh no, Fiji coming to OpenAI means that there's going to be ads everywhere.
advertising.
And as somebody who is, an ads stan for life, I was like, yeah, there are definitely corners of ChatGPT where if you're waiting for deep research or whatever, like I want to see the trailer to the next Marvel movie for sure. Anyways, it'll be interesting to see, but I don't think that they're going to. It doesn't feel like to me that OpenAI is sitting in rooms like, oh, how do we monetize at this point? So I think it'll be quite a while before we see any exploration in that.
I feel like we have a bunch of different AI headlines that maybe bring like a little bit more nuance
Yeah, Ashley, you want to
than
take
just
this
like
first?
the funding rounds. One that really caught my attention this week was the Klarna CEO saying that their sort of aggressive shift to AI they overdid it. They essentially tried to replace 700 support agents with AI, and their service like fell off a cliff, and customers were missing that human touch. And so now they are, lo and behold, hiring those humans back. And I think it'll be more of a hybrid model. But just interesting because so many of the headlines have been about the cuts and all the efficiencies that are coming with AI. And here we have like a very public, like mea culpa. We went too hard, too fast, and we still need the humans. So and maybe especially interesting because I think customer support is one of the areas where everyone's just priced it in that it's going to be mostly automated, but we are still early innings. We are not there yet, and maybe especially interesting to hear this from a company that made such a big deal out of going all in on AI.
Well, I think this is one of the most exciting things about being in the early innings is we're finding the boundaries for which people don't want AI to be necessarily involved. Like last week, we hosted like a CMO dinner, and somebody was talking about Sweet Green, how there was like a lab or a location in Brooklyn where they had robots basically putting together these salads, and like you could come and you could watch the robot do it, and people did not like that at all. And so like food is one of those things where even if it could be cheaper, more efficient, whatever, to have AI more involved in the food making process, people want to like have that human touch and know that their meal is prepared by a person with care. And so I think we're going to see that sort of sprinkled across like all parts of the service industry. Like I think there are a lot of things in the beauty industry, right? Like hair and makeup appointments, or like your nails, right? It's like not crazy to think that there's like AI or some sort of robotics that will eventually be able to do maybe 90 something percent of what we go pay for in terms of services. But maybe there are all those very human things around it that are part of the total experience that we're not ready to give up.
The internet had a lot of fun with this one. Marc Andreessen saying that venture capital will be the last human role to be taken by AI. And knowing Mark, I'm guessing we talked a little bit about rage farming last week. I'm guessing he was being intentionally provocative, and he knew that would get some mileage on the internet. But his point was that it's all about taste and making bets on people, and especially at the early stage with very incomplete information. And Helen, I think I saw you tweet like
Yeah.
a non-apology, but basically like agreeing with some parts of that sentiment.
I actually agree with all of it, and it's very rare I will publicly be like, I agree with Marc Andreessen. But I think that this is actually informed by data. So at AngelList, one of the parts of my job was to like work with the data science team and figure out like what stories we want to put out in the market and sort of what reports are worth publishing and getting some press around and having people talk about, you know, the data that the AngelList has. That's pretty unique. And one of it was, you know, one of the studies were looking at early stage venture returns. And basically, the takeaway is at the really, really early stages, it is very random. And growth stage, you know, you can look at data rooms. There's a lot of stuff in there where you can, you know, more accurately predict, like, do they have the traction and, you know, the partnerships and sort of like the early signals, and can you pattern match companies that will have like an eventual successful exit. But in the really early stage, the point was you could pick the perfect founding team based on backgrounds. You could pick the perfect large market. You could pick the perfect wedge into that market, all of these things. And yet with early stage, because it's so early, you know, the number one killer of startups is actually like the founding team. And we, you know, when we had the Cooley CEO on, it's like sort of people problems, right? And so even with that early, you know, very, very perfect founding team, like one could go through a bad breakup, or one could, you know, have a death in the family that really like, you know, impacts their ability to lead. And like, they're all just these people dynamics that happen so early that it is more random than not. And I think what Marc Andreessen is saying is like those dynamics and sort of those things, like the people stuff, like it's all quite random. And getting to know people on like a personal level, you know, whether it's just through the sort of like diligence process or just the relationship building that might happen over a really long period of time, like you get a better sense of those very random variables that come with people. Yeah.
I love that. I wish I could remember the name of the person being interviewed, but there was an Invest Like the Best episode where Patrick Shaughnessy was interviewing an investor and asking him about like, oh, how do you pick? And I loved, like, there's a lot of humility in his answer. He's like, well, I try to understand like the product and what pain points it solves and who the customer is. But he's like, really, I just try to understand if the founder is pre-fall or post-fall. And what he was getting at is, has this person been through something so profound in their life where they've like hit bottom and had to rebuild themselves before? And not to say he wouldn't invest in someone who's pre-fall, but a pre-fall person, you don't quite know how they're going to respond if
That's
they
right.
get divorced while they're building their
That's
company
right.
or have a health thing. Whereas someone who's been through that before at least has like the muscle memory and the understanding of like what it's like to to go all the way down and come back up. And I thought that was so eloquently put. And I now try to incorporate that gracefully into some of my investing conversations. And that is the type of thing that like AI analyzing a pitch deck isn't going to pick up on. And it's funny because I talk with a lot of other emerging managers who are training AI on their like prior investor memos to grade like all decks and pitches that come in on a 100-point score, and they only talk to like the top 30%. And A, I think that's a really cool use of the technology, but B, it's a very poor way to gauge the human element in all of this. And so
but I would argue that approach could work for growth stage and later, like late stage. Because there's actually something to underwrite. If the CEO goes crazy, you can replace him, or you can, you know, you can like there's enough there that, you know, like little small leadership changes or something happening with the founders, like I think could be corrected and still see it through. Whereas in the earliest stages, I really just feel like it's the founding team.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny because I like saw the Marc Andreessen thing and I was like, oh, go me, like, you know, job security. And then we saw the semaphore piece about my prior career, communications and PR.
Go you again.
That was a fun narrative violation. I know, I'm like the most AI-proof human.
You are. You heard it here first.
Incredible.
I thought the story was fascinating from Ben Smith. Yeah.
Yeah. Sally, do you want to summarize it?
Yeah. I think the main takeaway was that the PR pros, the ex Ashley's Life World, is finding that traditional media is a lot more powerful when it comes to shaping narrative for the new era of search, which is ChatGPT and Claude and all the other discovery tools, versus going direct, which is some of the strategy I think a lot of people are talking about, going on socials and trying to shaping the narrative on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And it's more powerful to actually go to the traditional media because that's where a lot of the content is being trained from, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah. I
Fascinating,
think there
but
was
like my
some line.
biggest pet peeve in life is like when very smart people try to make things so black and white and sort of binary, knowing that their
Mhm.
followers will take things very literally, because I feel like it's so disingenuous. They like know what will happen with that. And I think that when people are saying go direct, they're not saying go direct and ignore traditional media. I think it's an and, not an or. But in order to really get your message through and break through the noise on Twitter, because there's so much noise, like you have to be very, very like clear in what you're saying. And sort of it creates this, there's no room for nuance, right? There's no gray area on places like Twitter. So I think that the go direct folks, in fact, often the people who are saying go direct, they spend a lot of time with traditional media and building those relationships as well, but they don't talk about that, right? And then you have this entire generation of founders who are like, oh, I don't need to spend time with traditional media. I just need to go direct. But it's like they're taking that sort of message very literally. And I think that I'm hoping that this Semaphore article and pieces like it that are saying this take off a little bit, so people are thinking about it more holistically and not like I can only do one or the other.
The other cool thing for my comms peeps out there that I was thinking about, in addition to this article being a bit of a like, oh wait, like your relationships with media are more valuable than ever, like jokes on the internet, uh, is it used to really bother me that there was so little quality writing about comms. And actually, like a big piece of that, like what goes on behind the scenes. And a big piece of that is like in a crisis, you're not going to talk about like the shit show that was happening, in the war room and, the tough decisions that were made. But also in the best moments, you want things to look effortless. You want things to look like this company narrative is on this incredible trajectory, not because there are really smart people like crafting the narrative behind the scenes and building the media relationships and like planting the seeds. You just want it to look inevitable, right? And so it's a craft where I feel like a lot of the content that is out there is sort of the most basic, and misses all of the really like nuanced decision making that happens. And I used to think like, oh man, it's such a bummer. People think PR is like so dumb, and we've talked about like the hierarchy of careers in Silicon Valley and tech, and like early in my career especially, it bothered me that like PR was kind of at the bottom, right? Like great stories tell themselves, like um uh and uh and now I'm like, wait a second, like it would be very hard to train AI to replace the job of a comms person, because what the fuck are you training it on? There's just like there aren't good case studies, there aren't like great transcripts or essays, etc. I mean, there's some exceptions. There are people who do some great writing on comms and give some great interviews, but compared to other Silicon Valley professions, I feel like it's actually like quite off of the public internet. And so maybe that's a moat. Maybe the fact that like comms people have not been sharing the secret sauce for the past couple of decades is going to keep those jobs in the human realm for longer than they otherwise would be.
This is our obviously the big block, talking about what's defensible in the age of AI. And going back to Helen, your point about just relationship with the media, just as someone who's been in the newsroom and managing a bunch of reporters, the building blocks of storytelling is so critical, because it is, even though you might be um, sector focused reporter, so you might be covering AI or you might be covering healthcare, but you also have to understand the company, like from a narrative perspective, if the news breaks. So you need to find reporters that are interested in this topic, first of all, that also understand the topic, because if news is breaking, you don't have, a week or 2 weeks or a month to do a diligence like a VC does. You have a day or a few hours to be an expert in this company and then write about it thoughtfully. And so there's a little bit of that like storytelling that you need to like build a relationship with those folks, so that when news hits or when things get bad or when things are, when you're celebrating something, that they have full context, so that you are also telling the story in a holistic way too. So I think that's also just really important. And by the way, like investigative journalism is going to be more critical than ever. I think this is something that I've talked about a lot in terms of like where the media news landscape is going in the age of AI is, yeah, generalist top line, like wire news services are going to be, very obsolete, or, you're not going to have all these like generalist reporters in the newsroom. But what's going to be more important than ever is these investigative journalists, the way that like Jessica Lesson has been building the information, and how they're very specific about not, about reporting on exclusive news or breaking news, and not covering general news, is going to be so much more valuable going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Ashley, love that for you, but in marketing land, I still feel like, founders believe if you build it, they will come. If you need marketing, it's because your product sucks. And we grew to this many monthly actives without a dime spent on marketing, but now growth is plateauing. So reluctantly, let's bring in a head of marketing. So we're still there. And then to your point about like the PR pros haven't shared their playbooks, it's like every growth hacker is like just tweeting out, here are the 10 steps to go viral. Here's what I've done. So it's just sort of like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think that I started my career in brand advertising and, did like Super Bowl commercials and a lot of stuff that like you can't precisely measure the ROI of. I know that's very frustrating for a lot of people, but I think it's like that stuff. It's like what gets an emotional response and has people thinking differently. And it's that sort of taste and storytelling and maybe that's what AGI will offer, but until then, I would suggest that people who I think a lot of liberal arts majors who were told like you need to be more quantitative if you want to go into marketing or you want to like work at a tech company, you have to like quantify everything. It's actually kind of interesting right now to be like, actually, it's those really non-measurable pieces that might make you most valuable in the market in this AI age. So how do you hone that? I don't know, like, go to an art museum for crying out loud, or just spend some time outside, like
Go for a walk.
Go to a music
Like,
festival.
think a little bit.
Yeah, totally. All these creative pursuits that I feel like we've been told to give up because you just got to learn how to code and you got to be very online. So, anyways, it's interesting. I don't know what happens, but I'm fascinated.
Helen, are you calling engineers uncreative?
I think the best engineers are quite creative.
I think what's interesting in all of the conversations is I feel like anytime people bring up jobs that AI is going to replace, the conversation always seems to jump directly to more storytelling or engineering or some of the, like, for lack of a better word, a lot of the like really sexy jobs is what the conversation always seems to go to. But versus like experience, I feel like what people really want to pay for is like, dear God, get me the fuck out of Salesforce. Like, let me not have to project manage my shit. Like, I think that what AI ideally, like in a perfect world, is coming for is all of the like really deeply frustrating and unfun stuff. Like, what if I could I would love to get to a point where I don't have to like be a genius at Excel to make a financial model. And I feel like the market and the use case and the like ability for that is coming way sooner than for something that's actually like genuinely good at understanding my product better than I can in developing and devising a product roadmap. So I don't understand why the conversation always seems to go towards sales or marketing or product, or like engineering makes a little bit more sense just because of how quickly they've been able to make some really decent engineering tools. Like, for all of the shit about vibe coding, it's way better. The vibe coded stuff is better than the slop that gets put out in like the papers and the tweets that you can like straight up identify just by sight. I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Well, I think sales is interesting because, sales, there's still like a human trust element, right? Like maybe not self-service. And tech teams have been optimizing the heck out of like the homepage experience for that for like really large contracts, enterprise deals, probably the size of the type of stuff that you work on Mac. Like I don't yet see how AI will replace the way people make decisions, which is, I trust this person. I want to be in a long-term relationship, with this company, right? I think that they've got a future and that fits our vision of the future, and we're going to grow together. And like that kind of stuff, to have it be, something that you input on a form, right? And then have it spit out like, yes, we should buy this software, like, or sign this contract is I just don't see that happening. A question I used to ask founders that I worked for, who are all very smart, very technical, right? Is like, to what extent is your buyer as rational as you? And that is always the question that they sort of like sit with for a little bit, right? Because they themselves, they know that they are very rational, they know that they are very intelligent. But it's like, do you think that people make decisions in the same way that you do? And I have news for you. If you are selling into like mass market or even Fortune 500, right? It's like there are a lot more considerations in how decisions are made to buy software, for example, just keep using that, than just sort of like pure rational thinking. And that's the kind of stuff that I don't think AI has figured out yet. Again, I have not seen AGI.
I asked ChatGPT in preparation for this episode, like what are the human attributes or skills that like people, especially younger people in their careers, should double down on to be a little bit more like future proof. And it's funny, there's so much overlap with what's just come up organically in our conversation today. The first one is relationships. So that's like the semaphore example with journalists. It's the sales example where it's about trust and a person on the other end of that transaction. The second is probably one that VCs would hold near and dear to the hearts, which is taste, right? A taste, aesthetic judgment. That's like a very human quality still. Another one was curiosity-driven synthesis, which I thought was interesting. According to ChatGPT, humans are uniquely good at connecting the dots between disparate things. Moral judgment. Some of us are better at that than others. Original creativity. AI is very good at remixing, but truly like something new and original is uniquely human. Resilience and adaptability, so shifting with the change in circumstances. And then the last one was actually leadership and narrative crafting, which I thought was cool. I mean, we'll see if that changes when we have our first AI-led successful company, like leading its team of AI bots to great heights. But yeah, all things pretty much that have, for the most part, come up naturally and feel correct to me. And actually feel like things I'm excited to lean into. And to Mac's point, versus being like really great at like project management or organizing data, or even just for me, the big unlock, these AI note-taking apps and calls. Like I've always been a note taker. I've always thought that maybe writing notes down as I'm having a conversation helps me remember information better. But oh my gosh, it is so liberating to actually just be fully present in a conversation and know that something much better than me is taking notes. And so I think these little things that actually help move human interaction to the forefront are so powerful and help craft a bull case for AI. I mean, we'll see. There's plenty of dystopian projections out there, but my experiences of it so far have been ones that deepen human connection versus erode it.
The senses are super interesting to think about too, like all of the senses that we have. Like, is anyone else a super smeller?
Did you see? Was this inspired by Sam Altman's tweet about scent?
I did not, but well,
gosh.
I'll catch up on that. But where I was going with this,
Okay.
is like, I'm a super smeller, and like, it's just it can be a blessing and a curse. And I'm just sort of like, there are obviously so many things that AI cannot replace with regard to like the senses, like touch and taste.
All right, guys, let's head over to our rapid fire. So this Q&A, as always, is brought to you by Mercury, the fintech used by over 200,000 startups to simplify their finances. All right, the question this week is, I am starting to think about fundraising, and I've gotten feedback not to raise in the summer. Is there a good time to fundraise? A seasonality question. I love it. Mac, you want to take
As
the
we
first
head into the
pass?
summer.
It's so
Yeah.
funny. People always talk about like, don't fundraise in the summer, don't fundraise in the fall. I think like the fall end of year is a little bit more real, just because like some funds have some fall, not really, but like truly like winter, like late December, I think is a little tough because VCs take actual holidays. That said, I think like every VC I know is going to drop basically anything regardless of where they are for a good deal. So I have personally been on the phone at the ass crack of dawn or late night, depending on how you decide to measure the AMs of the world, going through and walking someone through, here's all of the pluses of this deal, here's all the minuses of this deal, here's all of the steps we've taken to make sure that it's happening while a general partner's on a vacation. So you can still fundraise now. I think what's more important is being really strategic about how you do the fundraise, when you approach, who you approach, how you decide to take meetings and really trying to time constrain it. And then how you do that presentation versus doing it in the summer. Fundraising in the summer is fine. Does anyone else disagree?
I mean, the company might have their own timeline and their own milestones, right? Like maybe the company wanted to fundraise or thought the best time to fundraise was after they closed a couple of deals, or they got like a major LOI signed, and that might hit in June and July. And maybe like the best time to go fundraise is like on the heels of that. And I don't think that seasonality is a reason to postpone if it's otherwise the best time for the company. Sally, I mean, you're the only one of us who's had experience fundraising for a startup, so you might want to actually.
Yeah, we started our fundraise in May, and so we actually had this discussion internally. And the feedback we got was ultimately like people are going to take the meeting, and they're going to get out of their vacations to do it. I think like one exception was, which is more comedy than anything else, but Burning Man was really a factor. Because a lot of VCs do go to Burning Man, and without a Starlink, you don't have access. So I have gotten the feedback to avoid that September timeframe. Our company raised from Europe as well. So we had a lot of European and French funds, which obviously is part of Europe. And the French investors actually do take off in August. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And they're very diligent about that. But that was my
very
own
French.
experience.
I think in the US too, it's also a factor of like what types of investors you're pitching.
Totally.
Like emerging funds or smaller funds, like I don't think most of us are taking super glam like month-long vacations. So and in fact, like, maybe our edge is that we're hustling more. And I personally, we've done a bunch of deals in the summer over the years, and I love it because I'm just less inundated and have more capacity to go deep. And so, it's the same thing as like if you have an announcement you want to make, like it can be a great time to try to do that when things are, quieter, and maybe that's during the week that everyone's avoiding because you're starting to get close to the holidays. So I say like don't overthink it, and to Helen's point, the seasonality of your own business matters more than the seasonality of venture.
And maybe one other thing that Mac mentioned I think was important is just managing the process and be clear when you talk to the VCs, like what your expectations of the fundraise is going to be, and you don't want to like drag it along throughout the summer.
Have something compelling that everybody wants, like be a winner and everything will go well for you.
A quick reminder, each week we answer your questions. Don't forget to submit them at anothergreatchat.com. Programming notes will be off for a few weeks, so we'll see you soon. Send us questions.